let's talk about narrative art and what it means and how it's different from fine art and how commercial art is something special and something that I love. So let me share my screen and show you what I got. Visual storytelling, or art that tells a story, is different than what you might think of as traditional art. This summer at Comic-Con, George Lucas came and described and promoted his new museum that's being built in the heart of Los Angeles, down at USC. This is an artist rendering of what that new museum is going to look like. Frankly, it looks like a big, cool spaceship. No straight lines in it at all. It's a cool rounded feature that has all kinds of landscaping and stuff that's kind of built in and around the building. George himself was there not to talk about Star Wars, but to talk about what he called a temple to the people's art. And so that intrigued me a little bit, and I wanted to talk about what the people's art is and what he meant by that. And I think it's a reaction to what maybe the avant-garde thinks of as fine art. Most museums are dedicated to that, which means that they feature famous famous art from many generations, including old antiquities and other things. Think of the Getty in Los Angeles. But George, on the other hand, has an extensive and elaborate collection of pop art, things that were created for a commercial purpose. Think of all the amazing things he's collected over his years of movie making, from preliminary illustrations to props, all different kinds of things he's got. Well, he also, at a young age, started collecting comics and cartooning and other art created by, maybe these lesser than artists or unknown artists. And his collection is extensive. I understand that he also has many Norman Rockwells and other famous illustrators because at one time, George himself said he wanted to be an illustrator. So he has a real appreciation for popular art, and that's a good thing. Along with George, Guillermo del Toro came and talked about his collection and how he is actually a board member of this new museum. And he even off the cuff said, I think I'm going to send all of my stuff there too. He has a really cool collection built into this creepy, weird library called the Bleecker House. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It looks pretty cool too. So I can't imagine those two collections coming together. It would be so awesome to see all that stuff. Here's a little picture of that house full of all his curiosities. Another presenter that came with them was Doug Chang. Doug Chang is one of those illustrators that worked for George for decades, helping develop and pre-visualize the Star Wars films and others. But he's most notably known for his work on the prequels. And these are a couple examples of his beautiful paintings that he created in the process of developing ideas, vehicles, and creatures for the film. He too is a big proponent of this kind of art, this art made by professionals for an entertainment purpose. Here's a little example of them working on, the pod racing stuff for episode 1. So, what is narrative art? What is this people's art that George is talking about? Is it this? This is a famous painting by Jackson Pollock. I don't remember what it's called. This is the people's art. This is an example of a Norman Rockwell. And I always thought this was ironic and a little bit funny that Norman Rockwell painted this image of a man observing at a museum, looking at a Jackson Pollock, while at the same time he painted a Jackson Pollock to go into his illustration from this story. And Norman Rockwell had an amazing sense of character and design and staging and acting that he would put into his artwork. And his art would tell a dramatic story. And this one, like I said, is a little bit ironic, but this is what we're talking about. Art that has a little background to it. There's something in it. One of those things that you see in narrative art is captivating characters. Here we go. A lot of people don't think of this in these terms, but the Mona Lisa is a captivating character. It's a portrait of a mysterious woman that has become the most popular piece of art in the world, but it's also representational, and it shows this woman in her element in a beautiful setting, painted for all to admire. Now, She's captivating. She has this look on her face that's, I guess, kind of serene but mysterious, and people have always wondered who is she? What's her identity? But in any case, this kind of art focuses on a person. And I like using this as an example of an old world version of this people's art. Here's a more not recent, but newer example from Alphonse Mucha from the Art Nouveau movement, who always worked in these intricate design pattern illustrated posters where he would have usually a female model and he was advertising a product or something else and turning it into this ornate design all around beauty and then whatever object or thing he was advertising. And so it's kind of a combination of art and commerce where this is really where we start to get that sense of commercial art. One of my favorites, Adam Hughes, the comic book artist, also draws pretty women. And here's his version of Wonder Woman drawn with the star pattern and interesting design. I've always liked his flourish and the way that he, shades and characterizes the character. And so he's an example of maybe a more modern cartoonist or comic book artist that works in this field. And he himself attributes his style to someone like Mucha, looking back in time at those previous illustrators that also tried to capture a likeness. So, in addition to captivating characters, we want to see incredible imagery in narrative art. We want to be taken away to an interesting world and see something that surprises us or tells us something. Now, you wouldn't put this example into this idea of commercial art, but I do because it's the Sistine Chapel and it is telling one of the most incredible stories in history, right? It's different scenes from the Bible, all illustrated on the ceiling of a church. And they're meant to tell that story. They're meant to be dramatic and interesting and colorful. And it's really bright and amazing that Michelangelo took all that time to paint that onto the ceiling. But to me, it was a commercial purpose. He was paid, he needed to tell a story, he needed to promote something. It was all kind of a hired process. And one of the most amazing examples of that kind of art from the Renaissance. Here's another Mucha, one of my favorites, of course, where he was doing design and illustrating a story on behalf of Sarah Bernhardt, who was a famous actress. And I believe this was in the late 1800s in Paris. She was a famous actress that was doing many different types of productions, and Mucha was there to help print and promote her work through the poster art that he generated. Always, looking for that heightened, idealistic female portrait while creating that ornate design all around it to tell the story of whatever the play was going to be. And this captivated the audience while at the same time connecting with a commercial process, which was printmaking, which was a fairly new process in figuring out how to make posters and promotions. And his art dovetailed right into that. More modern example, one of my favorites is Drew Struzan, the poster artist. Of course, this is one of his paintings for Revenge of the Sith, and it depicts those famous characters, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Amidala, there, and Darth Vader in the background, telling that story, telling us what's going to happen in the movie, or at least teasing us. I don't think modern movie posters remember what this is like because now we get a lot of Photoshop when we get a lot of floating heads. But yes, we've got floating heads, but they're there for a reason. The expression that's captured on the face, the arrangement, in this case, kind of the pyramid pattern, which focuses all of our attention on Anakin, the fight down below, Yoda off to the side, Darth Vader looming over the top. It says something and gives us a hint of what's going to happen in the movie. I don't see that a lot in the Photoshop work that's done. The Photoshop work that's done is more about, hey, this is who's in the movie. You know, this tells a deeper story and intrigues us. And because it's rendered and painted, it feels special. And that's one of the reasons I love this kind of narrative art. George Lucas has tons of Drew Struzan pieces in his collection. I hope to see many, many more at that museum. So, characters, imagery, and now to the storytelling. We want to hear or see a spectacular story, and this art tells that story. Now, this is another version of storytelling. Look at this illuminated manuscript that was created around the Bible. These amazing artisans would spend decades by hand, writing the calligraphy and painting and drawing each page of these original books. Extremely valuable and amazing that they would dedicate their lives to putting so much detail into these special and important stories of the Bible. Well, take that down a rung to something more mundane as, say, an adventure story like Treasure Island. N.C. Wyeth, one of the great illustrators from the 20th century, also illuminated stories by rendering these beautiful paintings that would capture events that were maybe alluded to in the story, but he had a way of capturing that moment in time that you couldn't really describe in the text. And that's the power of illustration, is that it can say something outside of what's written. And the combination of the two, what's written and what you see, creates something else in our mind. And that's what this narrative art does, is it really connects with us in a special way. Of course, maybe the most mundane or commonplace for me is comic books, but they serve their purpose. As a kid, comics really reached into my mind and taught me amazing things about different stories. And you see these wacky adventures on these, pulp pages, but it's fun to read them and to see what happens with the characters in an amazing way. And so telling those stories is only enhanced and better with art to go with it. So pictures and words are meant to go together. So to finish up here, I'm going to tell you the five essential elements that, in my opinion, make the best narrative art. All right. Number one, got to have a strong concept and a theme. All right. So we're not just trying to paint our feelings and create some abstract work that makes us feel something. We have a strong concept. We have an opinion, and we're trying to get that theme across. You know, Here we have Indiana Jones, another collection of Drew Struzan paintings. What we are doing is highlighting that character. He is the most important hero on the page, and his look, his likeness, his costume, surrounded by the other cast of characters, done with texture and light and flames and skulls and all that stuff, feeds into that story. And it really tells us this theme when we see it on the page. We know what we're getting when we look at one of these posters, and we have an affinity for the story, and we understand more about the character. We need those compelling characters. That's also an essential element of this type of art. Those characters are the focus of this art. Here's some compelling cast of characters, each one unique and interesting with a crazy costume and a weird and wacky ability. The X-Men is the crazy collection of powerful meta-humans that have such amazing different qualities. I mean, in the beginning, to me, they made sense when they had some of their powers, but now, you know, a mutation that allows you to walk through walls or project your appearance on others. It's interesting. Anyways, you can go deep in the different types of characters that can be created in the pages of comics. You don't have to obey any rules, and you can have a lot of fun with them. Dynamic composition. Okay, so now we're talking about how is that illustration constructed? How is it put together? Adam Hughes again, one of my favorites. Look at how he composes his pictures. He doesn't just slap a flat, standing stiff character on the page. He puts them in a dramatic action pose, plays with perspective. I mean, I love the way that flag just swoops around Captain America. Our eye traces that motion and settles in on his stern face. Or on the other one with Wonder Woman kind of coming at the pilot. What a dramatic, 1 point perspective right into the face shield. Plus, just the expression and the other things going on, that dynamic composition just sucks us in. So that takes a lot of planning and deliberate, purposeful design to make that work. And so compose your compositions with a strategy, with a point of view. Yes, we want to evoke an emotion. These last ones, patriotism, excitement. What's another emotion that we can evoke? Look at this dramatic pose telling the story of the death of Superman, right? Something so dramatic and powerful captured because we can see the main character in pain and in sad and distraught. Last but not least, our Narrative art needs to be clear and readable. We need to be direct. We need to display something that people can understand, or at least we want to. We want them to understand the story we're trying to tell. You know, if I removed the title Batman from this page and I just showed this scene where a boy and his parents, his murdered parents on the ground, I imagine like 90% of people would recognize that as Batman, even if I didn't have the title Batman on there. Of course, these are some beautiful panels from Batman Year One by David Mazzucchelli, an amazing artist who had this cool style and real dramatic sense for staging and storytelling. So, to sum up, narrative art is special. It's something that tells a story. It's crafted by great artisans, but it also serves a commercial purpose, and that's okay. And it's okay to be popular. It doesn't have to be at a distance on a wall, so perfect and pretty that we don't understand it or we have to be told what it means. No, it's clear, concise, and direct, and it makes sense and it makes us happy. So to me, that's narrative art. Enjoy.